There we go. It's ducky time. Well, there's no ducks around here. As you know, yesterday was a holiday for a lot of people. And a friend of mine came over that lives down the street to bring me his old lawnmower that he had. He wanted to get rid of it and figured I could use it. And that's true. I can definitely use it. And something interesting we were talking about when we were kids in the neighborhood. Huh. Hey, got some cyclists out and about. This is a great day for cycling. The temperature's in the 70s. Yes, it is. Nice in the morning. It gets a little hotter later, but this is the best time of the year. So instead of driving to the store, which I could do, why would I? When I can ride. That's right. Anyway, we were talking about some of the things that we remember growing up. And it came down to the subject, which involves bicycling. And he reminded me of someone I had totally forgotten about. When I was in high school, and again, high school is when I started carnivore diet, and I became very anti-establishment. What was the establishment in the 1980s? It was all about materialism, debt, stock market, the whole yuppie movement, all the same kind of crap that we see today, and all the cool stuff from the past, 30s, 40s, and 50s, was being wiped out and replaced with that crappy 1980s aesthetic. The cheap plastic, although colorful, the silly shoulder pads that women wear, and the silly designer clothes, and all the other crap. Let's see over here. Look at the plantains in this yard. They're all kind of dying out. Here's some. Look at that. These are so much smaller than mine. Look at how skinny they are. Got a bunch of dead branches. The problem is, these yards, they tend to have a lot of concrete. These are townhouses and sort of these smaller homes. I don't see any sprouts coming up, but a lot of dead leaves. No one trims it. It's not like my yard. In my yard, all the dead banana leaves get trimmed off and everything gets mulched up. They do get watered, but my yard has a lot more dirt. But anyway, in the 80s, this is kind of when this development was being built, the late 80s. I think it was 89, 88, somewhere around there. This used to be a field with 3 radio towers that the local AM station used. Good morning. And it was basically natural. On the other side, they had built those townhomes, but not that far from here, we had cow pastures. So I see people have their dogs out for a walk. It was kind of interesting. There we go. Good morning. It was kind of interesting because between the 1980s and now is like a whole different world. All you see on the right of me didn't even exist. Of course, this bicycle path wasn't here either. It was a dirt road. You can see the remains of it over here. If you go by the canal, it's still kind of some of the old rocks and asphalt. This was a dirt road that went back here. And it went about as far as here because this is pretty much where the little building was located for the radio station. It was sort of a house-looking thing. It looked like it was built in the 50s. It had the old aluminum casement windows, so that was built here first before any of the other homes were built. And growing up, this field was a place where we used to ride ATVs. We'd ride our bikes through the trails. Hello. And they would, a lot of times if there was somebody there, they'd try to chase us out, call the cops on us and whatever. My other friend lived on the other side of this neighborhood, his backyard adjoined the field. So you can be sure we'd go over there, bring the ATCs or my six-wheeler, fire them up, ride all around here. And then out here by the canal, they had this, which they still have, this barrier. They even at one time had a big gate. They had this closed off. Now, back then, they used to allow people to close off these right-of-ways, but now they have to be publicly accessible. Garbage everywhere. Yeah, this canal on the right side, this whole thing was part of that field. Sadly, though, it was developed like everything else. Now, in the 1980s, as you know, there were less people here, and of course things were less expensive, but people generally made less money. There was a whole movement that was taking place, and it was a 1980s thing. I don't know if anybody remembers the term yuppie. You know what a yuppie is or was? Well, back in the 60s and 70s, you had the hippies. The hippies were sort of the counterculture. They were the ones that rebelled against the conservative and thrifty and conformist culture of the mid-century period. Even though they kind of grew up in that culture, the suburban, consumerist, and all the other stuff, they came up with their own way of rebelling against it. And what that was, it came down to the so-called peace and love. They had their peace symbol, and then love this and that. But of course, the reality is that most of them were quite selfish, and the only thing they were caring about was trying to find whatever pleasure they could get, which would include substances, various drugs, sexual immorality, and all the other things that people do as an excuse for pleasure. Good morning. And when it comes down to it, if you really think about it, true pleasure actually comes from being productive and being able to have what you need plus a little extra that you can share with others. That's where the true pleasure comes from. But that doesn't make the parasite class very much money. So anyway, the hippie movement was a threat to the existing consumerist system. So they opposed it initially. But then you'll notice that in the late 60s, there was sort of a change. Now, a lot of it, I think, came from the Vietnam War. People initially volunteered for this thing. A lot of people believed in it. But when the news media actually showed how things really were, many people became disgusted with it. And they wanted out of it. So what was initially seen as fringe and extreme, the hippie movement, sort of got a little bit mainstreamed. Even though it never really was mainstream. Now, as time went on, like everything else, things begin to change. And the reality is, and this is important, speaking of reality, notice that diesel is $3.39, but premium is $3.19. When diesel is that much higher than gasoline, that's usually a sign that oil prices are going to be increasing soon. So, if you're going to buy gas, buy as much as you can right now. You're going to save money. Another one of my predictions, which I'm sure will be right. Anyway, the so-called counterculture became absorbed into the culture. Now, of course, in the 1970s, the inflation caused by the leaving of the gold standard and the ability to print money out of thin air, that had a hard effect on the economy. And what it ended up doing, it ended up causing people a lot of anxiety. So the thriftiness and the sort of anti-consumerist returned. But some of the influence from the 60s, from the hippies, the bold colors, the macrame, and some of the other things that the clothing styles, they became more outrageous. This was the whole disco generation, you probably remember. Think of the leisure suit and all that stuff. So what they did, they took some of that counterculture and they mixed it into the regular culture, which is pretty good. And with that being said, I think in many ways it set up what happened in the 1980s. Now the 1980s, you can look at the TV shows, you can look at the popular culture. A lot of the things that start in the 70s. Now, a good example, you probably remember, there was a lot of rural focused shows in the late 60s, and they got purged by the 1970s. But then some of them came back. Now, Hee Haw was a good example of a show like that. But another show that came back, there was a couple of them, and then a new one came out, which was called The Dukes of Hazzard. And if you're not familiar with The Dukes of Hazzard, you might want to look that one up. It's a pretty funny show. But anyway, the whole 70s culture, in the mid-70s, and I remember this as a kid, there was a return to country music and country culture. This is one of the reasons why out here in horse country, this area finally got its own protectors. This, instead of being turned into apartments like everything else around here, it has remained semi-rural. Now, it's very expensive, and that started in the 1980s. But in the 70s, this was still an affordable and nice place to live. I had several friends from school that lived in this neighborhood. This neighborhood is the one I spent the most of my time in growing up. They had everything here from horses and cattle to these plant nurseries. There were not a lot of nurseries back then, but there was a lot of fruit trees. You had avocados and mangoes. Horse country also, by its name, had a lot of horses. In my opinion, in all of Miami-Dade County, this is the best neighborhood. If I was going to pick a neighborhood to live in, it would be here, horse country. And people laugh, well, horse country is kind of dumpy. The houses tend to be small. Well, there's a few mansions. Some of these people, the drug dealers, started moving here in the 1980s. So you can see where this nursery is. There's lychee trees in here. This at one time was a grove. They're nurseries now because they make more money. These annual plants and these landscape plants, they make a lot more money than growing and selling fruit. But they actually did leave some of the fruit trees here as shade instead of building a shade house. These house plants don't do well sitting in full sun. Their roots getting baked. It's just not a good way to go. So anyway, I spent a lot of time on this side of the street where these houses are now. Those were all pastures. There was a guy out there, Cuban guy, drug dealer, had a bunch of money, bought this large property, had to be 40 acres, and used to have these get-togethers every holiday season, Christmas and New Year's. Around this time of the year, they'd be setting up the tents, they'd be setting up for the food. They invited people, they charged admission for some things they invited their friends over. And a friend of mine, who was a friend of their family, used to work there, and they would sort of hire us kids to do some of the work. And sometimes we wouldn't get paid, but we'd always get a chance to go there and eat whatever we want. So this really was, in my opinion, a nice place. Okay, with that being said, yeah, it's all gone now. But I think back to the 1980s, and by the way, back then, the Sunset Drive was 2 lanes. There was open space on both sides. People would park there when they had their event. And there was no sidewalk, although part of it did have a asphalt trail that was for bicycles. But most people out here rode horses. Oh, it looks like they're at the nursery. Wow, with the bobcat. That's interesting. That's a job that I like. Huh. Gotta check that out. Always doing something there, but never seems to make a whole lot of difference. But anyway, in this neighborhood, it's all about the rural living. But then you had the yuppies, and they moved into many neighborhoods, and the first thing they would do, they would remodel the old house. They would get the BMW or whatever exotic car they wanted, and that was kind of their thing. So you can always tell where they were because they wore designer clothes and they had those crappy cars. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Yep. That's interesting. That's pretty awesome. What are they doing? Digging up trees? Huh. Yeah, they're over there taking up, digging something out of the ground. Huh. One of the first jobs I had was digging up trees and planting them. Pretty interesting. Let's see. Doing some digging. Pretty good. I've always been curious to see what they're doing here at the nursery. Can't really see much. Oh, there we go. Got an opening in the fence. Huh. That's cool. I guess they're mowing that stuff down. Interesting. Those skid steer mounted mowers are very handy. I built one for my Bobcat years ago. It's a great way to keep the weeds down. Huh. That's what it is. Yep. Got the rotary cutter. That's handy. I don't know if you can see it, but looks like that machine's loaded down. It's burning a lot of diesel. Must have bad injectors. Oh well. Anyway, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over to the Harbor Freight. I'm going to get the tools I need, and I may see if this person's still around. I've been wanting to talk to them about some of these plants around here. That's one of the newer Volkswagen vans. Looking good. Probably be gone by the time I get back anyway. That thing's smoking up a storm. I think it's time for new injectors. Oh well. Now, back in the 1980s, like I was saying before, is when this area began to change. What used to be rural, everything here was rural. We started building a lot of buildings. Now over here, this is one of the older homes. You can see on this side. It used to be part of a farm. Now it's actually part of the school across the street. For a while, they called this Red Berry's baseball world. But these were all on 5-acre lots. This one became a church, and the one on the corner became a church. So everything goes through these cycles, and this side of the neighborhood is not protected like horse country over there is. You can build on as little as half acres here, some of them in quarter acres, depending on which commissioner you paid off when you built the development. You can see over here they call it mansions at Sunset too. Now, I wouldn't consider these mansions, I just consider them the Mick mansions. So we need to put a Mick in front of that sign to be more accurate. These are about half-acre lots. They're not very big, but they're better than pretty much everything else. And further west, starting in the 60s, they built this other neighborhood, and those lots, they're about quarter acre, fifth of an acre, whatever they are, by the time you figure out the roads. Now, the whole yuppie culture is sort of the standard of the times. So, into the 1980s, I would say from about the time I was in high school, I started to see the yuppies popping up. They called them young, urban, preppy professionals. I don't know what the rest of it was, but I guess they just hippies, yuppies, whatever. Another thing they used to talk about was yucca, young, urban, Cuban American. That was a Miami thing. And basically, that's kind of what we encountered around here. All right, so in terms of the effect, what effect did it have on me? Well, because of the fact that I didn't like any of it. I was more into the space age 1950s, or what's known as populux, sort of a populist luxury, which means you get to have a bunch of this 1950s, 1960s kind of stuff. And let's see, there's a car here, there's no car here. The whole space age, that was my thing. I love the space age. Kind of like a rural version of the Jetsons. The Jetsons would be the city people. I would be the rural part of the space age. And I figured that by the 2000s, the space age would be here. We'd have our flying cars, our high-tech gadgets. Life would be so much easier. Wouldn't have to worry about learning multiple languages. We would have systems that could do that for us. Wouldn't have to do any busy work. And I never did understand why George Jetson worked as Spacely Sprockets. It seemed like his job could have been done by a robot. Now, the more I learn, the more I realize it's not going to happen. To duplicate all the things that a human being can do in a human environment would require so much power and so much technology, it's impossible. They will never build a robot that will outperform a human in a human setting. Robots work well in a controlled environment. Robots work well with repetitive tasks. But when it comes to solving problems, robots, they take so much more energy. They have so many more failures than your typical human being ever would. That thing's still working. And for that, I'm actually kind of grateful. Because the other thing that I've stressed many, many times is the importance of understanding entropy. And even though entropy is typically a law of thermodynamics, it is one of those things that the principle carries across. So the actual entropy or second law of thermodynamics, that applies to a closed system. But the concept of things becoming more disorder with time is the concept that I use. And even though life opposes entropy, it eventually fails as well. The thing is, if you build a robot, from the moment that robot is built, that's the best it's ever going to be. When you produce a baby, that baby is pretty much worthless when it's born. It has no value to society in terms of work. However, it's an investment, and a valuable investment. That's the reason why parents, good parents, dedicate their lives to raising that infant so that that person can become a productive and valuable part of society. That's the key. So you're not getting instant gratification. You're getting sort of a delayed gratification, and that's what investment is supposed to be about. It's not speculating in the bond and stock market. That's just rigged crony capitalism, and for the average person, it's just gambling. But quality investments, they combine the ability to have delayed gratification with an outcome that is greater than the human inputs. Now, obviously, every living thing has to eat and drink and so on to survive. And that food comes from that plant and animal world. And that increases entropy. So, in order for life to create more order, which goes against entropy, it has to create more entropy in the system as a whole. But thankfully, that sun that's sending energy to us right now is the only reason why the earth doesn't simply go totally chaotic. And again, if you've ever had a house plant where you have to water the plant constantly and you don't take care of it, it eventually dies. If you don't take care of your animal, it will starve to death. All of these things, they have a certain limited life. And understanding that is critical. But that maximum lifespan depends on quality inputs. And it's not just food and water, it's also the environment, the mental stimulation, so on. So when the whole yuppie thing came into view, to me that looked like a disposable society, a society that was run by short-term thinking, debt, and delusion. Because this is when the whole idea of designer clothes came up. What's the difference between your typical work pants and designer jeans? You're one of the gals that bought Gloria Vanderbilt jeans or Jordache jeans or whatever other jeans you were wearing. If you were the guy with the members only jacket, what was the difference between that and the generic type of clothing that you would normally wear? There wasn't any. So the reality was, you're just being scammed. That's all it was. You were being lied to and scammed. Okay. So, let's talk a little bit more about this. When it comes to the 80s and the whole yuppie aesthetic, whatever happened to that? Well, that went away. The yuppie theory, now it looks like they're getting ready to demolish this thing. You can see putting up a little fence here, private property. The bookstore is closed, the Michaels is closed. So how long before they turn this into an apartment building? Not long. Money flows like water here for real estate. Okay, let's see if we can get across this road. So, I guess even they chased out the vegan food truck that used to be here. Oh well. Anyway, like anything else, it goes through cycles. And the whole yuppie aesthetic, it went away. And then what happened? Well, they switched to a more conservative. You had this sort of resurgence of conservative ideas. Now, conservative ideas actually started in the 1980s with the Reaganomics scam, and that kind of fueled the whole yuppie thing. But people started going more to family values. Here in Miami, we were hit hard by a migration in 1980. These people didn't even push the stupid button. They got brain dead. Thank goodness. Come from another country, learn how things work here. Wow. Idiotic people, and now they're finally moving. That's the amazing thing. Okay. Right here. All right. Okay. Wow. Maybe they're just having brain fog from all the rice and beans to eat. That could be it. I don't know. If I wouldn't have gone across, they'd probably still be there. Anyway, I'm going to Harbor Freight. I'll get myself another set of those. What do you call them? Okay. There we are. Oh, it's still working. If you wonder why I don't take the camera into the Harbor Freight store, they play so much copyrighted music. And even though I'm not monetized, I don't like getting their little warnings or whatever it is. And even if I do become monetized and I decide to set these videos for monetization, well, I don't want some greedy executive stealing my little bit of revenue because somebody played a couple of seconds of cheap crap from whatever decade it came from. So a lot of times if I'm going in Presidente, they only play generic Latin American music, and it's not really anything copyrighted. A lot of that stuff is just locally produced. Where did my lock go? Oh, it fell down, of course. I noticed that the hand grips seem to be getting old and dry rotted, and they keep falling off. So anyway, for those of you that still enjoy my videos, and I congratulate you for watching them. They are quite long, but for me, for somebody who makes zero money on YouTube, I have had less views in 18 years than Carrie Mann had on one video last week. That's how pathetic my YouTube journey has been. But on the other side, I'm glad that I've met so many good people. I've met people that I never would have met if I didn't become active on YouTube. And I kind of regret taking off YouTube for 10 years because of what they did to me, because I could have met a lot of other people. But then again, since I was taking care of my mom, it's unlikely I would have been able to go and visit anybody. So what can I say? But anyway, let me get back to what I was talking about now. See, over there is the Barnes & Noble and the Michael's store. I'm sure that'll be demolished within a week or month or whatever, and they'll be building either another crappy shopping center that nobody needs or some apartments. I would tend to place my idea on apartments. That seems to be a very popular way to waste money in this town. I think I might cross here. Anyway, here's some more of these apartments and townhomes that were built in the 1980s. Oh, here comes a cop car. When I was a kid, we used to go cop bowling. We would wait until we heard the police siren, and then we would roll the bowling ball down the street and see if we could hit the police car when it sped through the intersection, and most of the time we missed. One time, we actually had contact, and the police officer went off the road and hit a ficus tree. Well, us kids, we were not the most intelligent at the time. So, anyway, when it comes to that old-fashioned concept of changing trends and ideas and so on, we know that there are trends. People are generally like sheep. They like to follow each other. They'll come up with some great idea, and then what they'll do, they'll just copy. A lot of times, people copy because they see somebody as successful. Now, I got a friend of mine, and his son is not, let's just say, he wouldn't be considered the cream of the crop, in my opinion. I'm not making fun of anybody. I'm just saying that a lot of people, they haven't learned how to think for themselves. And I do believe that one of the most important powers that a person can develop is what Mitch would call the BS detector. And I tell people, if you can think for yourself, you're going to be doing a lot better than someone who is looking to a leader, mentor, or whatever else, life coach or whatever it is. If you can think for yourself, you can have so much more available to you. You're not going to have to compete with so many people because while everybody else is following the crowd, they're going in one direction. You could go either ahead of them, you could go parallel to them, behind them, or even cross over. There's just a lot of options that you can do. And it all comes down to just having the confidence to know whether something is generally right or wrong. Now, for a lot of people, there's a risk because if you make the wrong decision, you have nobody to blame but yourself. And I learned a long time ago, some people go on luck. Now, if you've ever seen me, every single morning, I go into the Dr. Kilt's morning live stream. And every day they have some kind of a giveaway. You put the pound sign, or what everybody calls now hashtag, KMT. And they have a drawing. And I've seen people win over and over and over again. Dr. Kiltz himself, he wins every few times. Some people just win constantly. But when I put my name in there, it only comes up once in a blue moon, and I never win anything. And I've learned in my life, whenever something relies on chance, I'm going to lose every single time. So some people are just made in a way that if you're relying on chance, you're going to lose. This is probably one of the reasons why my YouTube channel remains very small and it's never gone viral. The only video I was ever in that went viral was the one with the Joey Schwartz kid, and he deleted the video so I can't even see it anymore. Pretty stupid. But on the other hand, when I do things that are skill-based, for example, let's say I'm fixing my truck. I had to fix the transmission in my truck years ago. Somebody had worked on that transmission before, and they fouled it up. But when I took it apart, I was able to find the problem and fix it. The one thing that I've learned in my case, if I learn a lot about a subject, and then I approach it in a logical and ordered way, I have a much greater chance of fixing the problem than anybody else I know. So people often call me to solve their problems. They have trouble with something. Many people have tried to fix it. They can't figure it out. Send it to Rick, and Rick figures it out. Well, Rick must be lucky. No. When luck is involved, I lose every single time. I'll give you another example. I collect all kinds of stuff, so I got my hands on a slot machine that takes quarters. This thing's got to be from the 70s. And it was broken, so I fixed it. And what I started doing, I have a lot of coin-operated devices, pay phones and pinball machines and all that stuff. I decided, let me see what it would take to win the slot machine. So I collected as many quarters as I could. I had a whole bucket full. And every day I put quarters in that slot machine. Over, and over again. I would go through the entire bucket, win nothing. Empty it out, put it back in the bucket, go through the whole process again. Oh, somebody's going for a run. Morning. Oh, guy's in good shape on the bicycle. I'm the only one around here that's in bad shape. Look at this guy over here going for a run. That's the kind of body that everybody would want. Now, when it comes to the slot machine, I went through that cycle at least 5 times with a whole bucket full of quarters. You can only imagine how many quarters that was. And I never won, ever. So I emptied out the machine, and I told a friend of mine, don't take my money, but you're welcome to go. And because he says, oh wow, a slot machine. I said, yeah, you can play it for free, but just don't take the money, because those are my quarters. So he sits down, starts playing the machine. In less than 5 minutes, clink, 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 the coins are falling out. Thinking, what the heck? What did you do? So then I told him, I said, well, try it again and see what happens. And it took longer the next time. He sat in front of that thing for at least half an hour. And guess what? Here it comes again. Clink, 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 clink. The coins are falling into the tray. You gotta be kidding me. I told him, I played that thing so many times. Like when I was watching a TV show, I used to watch TV at the time. I was talking to somebody, never won anything. And he won twice. I thought the machine was broken. Nope. But this is a guy who screws up his life and yet gets rich. So he does ridiculous things, falls into great jobs and great opportunities, makes a lot of money, lives it up, does something wrong, gets wiped out, goes right back, does the same thing over again. He's done that his whole life. Now, the reason I'm talking about him, I just found out something kind of sad. My friend, and I found this from my other friend, that lived like that and sort of lived in a way that, you know, he had his ups and downs. Well, he's actually got liver cancer. And I don't know if his luck's going to hold out this time. Now, he's a year younger than me. He's 56. So it's like anything else. You know, I may be upset that I just have no luck. All my luck is bad, if there was such a thing. I don't believe in good luck. I think it's a bunch of nonsense. That's why I don't gamble. I never gamble. That's why I'm not in the stock market. I used to be a big-time stock guy, but when the Federal Reserve started pushing that QE in there, and now they buy back their own stock, it's like a rigged casino. I won't play it. I won't do it. And of course, I pay the price. Being poor, I'm sitting on a bicycle when I could be riding around in my restored 69 Charger, living on a nice big ranch somewhere in rural Florida or some other state, and probably living it up pretty good. Instead, I'm on this. But I have to say, you know, Rick, I know a lot of people who ride bike, and every one of them has been in a bad car accident. You've been riding bikes for decades, and you've never so much as gotten an injury from all your bike activities. Even when you crashed into coconut trees and you fell through a concrete slab and hit one of these traffic controllers. I've hit a few of these things as one of these lids came up. Walked away with minor injuries. Same thing with driving. I've never caused an accident, and the only time I ever got hurt in a car accident is when I was riding with a friend of mine in his car. I was actually driving it to demonstrate what a good job I did on the air conditioning. We got hit, and I got a hernia, which I'm still dealing with. So I was talking to my friend yesterday. He said, you know what? And he says, well, Rick, I've known you for years. I think you've done pretty well. You've gone through your whole life without chronic health conditions. My friend actually has arthritis. Now, he's a year older than me. He's 58, he'll be 59. But I've never had that. He's had terrible back injuries. One time he hurt his back so badly, he was immobilized for months. He's had several surgeries. I think he's had his gallbladder out, all kinds of stuff. And me, I haven't been to a doctor since 96. I know he's had dental work. I haven't had a dentist since 86. So anything that involves my personal decisions, whether it's skill or, you know, repairing things or whatever, I drive junky cars. I've never been towed. I've always been able to get home. There's just, it's like a lot of things. But when it comes down to pure luck, pure chance, I always lose every time. And I accept that. But on the other hand, I meet some really good people, and even though I may not win a prize, somebody I know sees something that I like and they say, you know what, Rick, I got the gift for you. So in the end, I get pretty much what I want just by doing what seems to be right. No one's ever taken advantage of me. I've never been scammed. My computer hasn't even been hacked. And I think a lot of it is because I'm so cautious. I'm very suspicious of everybody. Everyone I'm suspicious of. And I'll tell you, that's one of the most, I think that's what saves me from getting in accidents. When I see somebody coming, I assume the worst. I see a car coming, I assume they're going to keep going. And it's just kind of the way that I think. When I work on a project, I'm very careful. If I'm doing electrical work, I assume the power's on. And many times, I've gone to work on something where they said the power was off, and it was on. I bring out my detector, and the guy insists the power's off. I said, if you're that confident, you touch that wire. When it comes down to that, they're not going to touch it. Sometimes I'll break out my jumper cables and short it. Bam! And blow the breaker. I'm like, problem solved. The power is now off. But it's just one of those things. I learned that from years of experience. Let's see if this bobcat is still mowing. Oh. I've been wanting to talk with this guy for a while. Yep, we're getting that cut. Things are handy. Pretty interesting. Oh, pretty good. That's a great way to go. Huh. There it is. You can see it. I'll wait for a little bit. Might be getting out of the thing soon. Tell you what, I wouldn't mind doing that guy's job for a day. It's not a very complicated job. You can just kind of do it. That's why I'm hoping I'll meet some of my farm friends online. Maybe they'll put me to work doing stuff like that, moving hay bales, cutting grass, or whatever. Oh, looks like he's stopping. Probably doesn't speak any English. We'll see. Yeah, that's the way to go. Hold on, let me see. Oh, that was interesting. Evidently, they do a lot of landscaping, and that's where they grow their trees, or at least they keep them when they're going to do another job. So the guy doesn't speak much English, but he speaks enough to communicate, which is good. Anyway, let me get back to what I was talking about. Now, 1980s was like the turning point for this area. This is when it started to go downhill. And then it stopped in the 90s thanks to Hurricane Andrew. Hurricane Andrew drove a lot of people out of here, and it stopped the development. So all the craziness that was getting worse and worse, it sort of stopped. And then it started to pick up again. So in the 90s, there was still a lot of good stuff around here. And of course, Andrew did a lot of damage down south. So that was a problem. Garbage everywhere. You know, when you think about it, it's just sort of some people call it progress. I call it downgrade. And this is one of the disputes that I've always had with the evolutionists. People that believe that evolution is how everything was made. I oppose that because I believe that the natural trend is for things to degrade with time, which would mean ancient people that lived before us, millennia ago, were more close to ideal than we are now. So what they could do, for example, the amount of work they could do, the talents they had, the ability to learn, I think was far in excess as to what we have now. So why do we have all this progress now, whereas in the past, people lived pretty primitively? Well, that's because it's like a tree. A tree starts out as a little tiny seed that sprouts, and as the tree grows, it becomes larger and larger, and it's better able to build on itself. So human civilization is like a tree. Basically, it starts to build, it gets bigger, and it's just a little at a time. And then we learn from our previous generations. Now, I know that there's people out there that they still swear by that evolution stuff, and it's a bunch of nonsense to me. And, well, Rick, you're not scientific, blah, blah, blah. You think that everything was created. Well, look at all these cars. If we don't maintain them, what happens to them? They rust and they disintegrate. Everything in the real world disintegrates with time. When something is new, it's the best it's ever going to be. So what humans have to do, they have to constantly, and I mean constantly, make changes to prevent these things from taking them out. All right, here we go. And that, in my opinion, is one of the most important concepts. So, do I believe that there's such a thing as evolution? Yes, I do. Do I believe that evolution creates new forms of life that are better than the old? No. I believe just the opposite. I believe that evolution changes existing life into a way that's downgraded. And if that was not the case, being inbred would not be a thing. Period. It's that simple. Now, you can try to prove me wrong, and you'll see this with society. As time goes on, it seems like our culture just keeps downgrading. Look at the little boxes that we build. Look at the ugly cars. Look at everything now. It's just stripped down, dumbed down, and crappy. If I would go through Miami in 1955 instead of 2025, this would be a much more colorful and interesting place. But it's not. Now, does that mean that as time goes on, we always just downgrade, and next thing you know, we'll all be cavemen picking up bugs and eating whatever we can get? Well, not necessarily, because here's the thing. Because human beings are living things, we can oppose entropy. We can use our mind and the resources we have, and we can still build good things. Even to this day, there are craftsmen, there are people out there that build quality things. And that is something that a lot of people forget about. And with all the technology and the knowledge we have, if we wanted to, we can make things even better now than we did centuries ago. So instead of building these boxy, painted, drywall-filled, crappy buildings, we can make something really nice. Whether you want to go modern or whether you want to go classical. We get rid of the drywall, we get rid of the drop ceilings, we put bigger windows that open, and maybe we still have air conditioning, but we might open the windows now and then. We might have more trees and less pavement. There are a lot of things that we can do. Instead of these cheap fences, we can make nice ones. But it takes time, it takes creativity, it's a lot easier to just follow the pattern. And this is a complaint that I have about a lot of people. They just follow the pattern. They get used to being mediocre. They get used to being crap. Since everybody else is crap. This is the reason why when these corporations take over, they have to get rid of what was there before. Because if you have something nice next to something that's crap, people are going to say, wait a minute, I'm getting shortchanged. But if you get rid of everything, now you have the ability to sell people crap and they don't know any better. Like all these ugly cars, every one of them is just butt ugly. They don't build anything attractive. And I don't care whether it's a Toyota Corolla or a Lamborghini. They all look like crap. They're cheap, just plain ugly. And the more expensive they are, the harder they are to fix. That doesn't do anybody any good, does it? All right. There we go. Okay. Anyway. So, this is probably the lesson that I want everybody to know. If you want to succeed, first of all, you have to define what success is. If success is all about making money, well, you're going to have to sacrifice other things to do it. You have to take advantage of people. You have to give them less than they deserve in order to get rich. It's impossible to be rich while giving everybody the best possible deal. Now, it is possible to live comfortably and give people a good deal. You know, I do work for people. I charge them sometimes a little too little, but generally a fair amount, and my customers are happy because I solved the problem. And that's really what we do. We give our time to others to help their lives be better. But some people, they figure that we'll just take advantage of everybody, and then they make their own life better, but at that expense. And if you keep doing that, sooner or later, people will figure you out, and they will retaliate. And when they do retaliate, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. Let's put it that way. Anyway, that's really it. So, one of the most important things, in my opinion, don't believe what everybody tells you. Don't be the person that fell for the scammer, whether they be on the phone, online, or whatever. And again, I got a friend that has a 20-something son that follows some of these internet scammers. I call him the Andrew Tate fan. All these Andrew Tate clones with their rented supercars and rented crappy apartments in the Brickell, downtown Miami area, talking about how great they are, how they make $50,000 a month. Just follow my plan and you're going to get rich. They always have some kind of free thing to tease you. And then what happens? Well, the free thing doesn't work. You got to move up to the next level. So the way they make money is by taking advantage of younger people who don't have enough experience to realize they're being scammed. When I was that age, I actually took my time and attended some of these free seminars so that I could see how a scammer works. Everything from the Don LaPree's scams to Tom Vu, all these people. They give you the free pitch and then they want you to sign up for their stupid courses or products or whatever. And then you have the multi-level marketers. They're always trying to sell some kind of product, health supplement, some type of program. And then when you sell it to somebody else, then they pay you and you can get this for free. Bunch of nonsense. Again, what was the person that said, behind every great fortune is a great crime? I do believe that. I think in many ways, that's just the way that it is. So anyway, if you're a smart person, you won't fall for it. You're going to go and you're going to think for yourself. You're going to learn from others. You're not going to believe anything that anybody says without seeing real results. If someone tells you that they can make your life better but won't tell you how to do it up front, they are scamming you. Absolutely. If you choose to hire someone for coaching services, ask them for their free sales pitch and ask them what they're going to do for you. If they don't tell you what you need to do up front, don't even call them anymore. Don't contact them. Or tell them, you're trying to scam me, I'm not interested. That's it. Because a quality person, whether they be a practitioner, whether they be a mechanic, whatever, you go to the mechanic, you ask them what's wrong with the car, they'll tell you honestly what they think is wrong with it. And if they can't tell you what's wrong with it, they're going to say, like I do, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to charge you this much for the time. And that's it. They're not going to make vague promises. They're not going to tell you that all you have to do is trust me and sign up for my program. No, it doesn't work like that. So anyway, learn from that experience and don't fall for these scammers. Don't be a victim. Don't be the sheep. Be the tiger. If you're the tiger, no one's going to want to mess with you. Now, there are tiger hunters out there, but in a field of sheep, the tiger is left alone. Sure, you can be the lion, but in order to be a lion, you need to have other lions around you. Lions don't live independently. The tiger, they do. Vulture, yep, vulture can do it too. But nobody wants to be the vulture, scavenging around to survive. But yet, even the vulture doesn't have it so bad. It's the sheep that have it bad. Hey, you could even be a goat. I mean, technically goats are prey, but they're difficult prey. So I think in some ways it's better to be the goat than the sheep. Anyway, I'm back home. Back to where I started from. I hope that you're having a great day and you'll have a nice weekend. And don't forget that tomorrow morning, if you wish to spend some time with me, you can go to Live at 8 with Rick and we can talk directly. Anyway, I'll catch you later.